Okay, so Next gives you support to use Sass, Less, Stylus, and regular CSS, but as an import, not as a link on the header, just like we have right here. I'm gonna close this. We are not gonna use it. So if I go right here to the web and I search for something called Next and then CSS or maybe plugins or Next CSS, or you have Less or maybe Stylus or maybe Sass, you're going to find something inside Site and Next plugins. So you have this 4 different ways: CSS, Less, Stylus, and Sass. I'm going to show you how the Next CSS works. Right? I'm going to do an import and I'm going to use the CSS as a module. Now the other ones work the same way as this one. So by showing you this one, I'm showing you pretty much all the other ones. And if you go through the documentation is pretty much the same. The only thing that they are changing is the installation and this. And with the installation, we need to do some installation because right by default, you don't get it right out of the box. With Next, you don't get it. You need to install a third-party library. All right. So I'm going to install this one, the Next-CSS. And I'm going to do the npm install, and I'm going to give you some more information. Let me do clear. I'm going to do npm install, and I'm going to install the CSS. All right, it's going to take a minute, and I'm going to go right back to the documentation. So after everything gets installed, if you go to the usage, it's going to say without CSS module or whatever. It says create a Next config the JS. And this is because, when you create a project with Next is going to take care of all the, the logic of building the application, parsing the contents, and creating the CSS and everything else. It's going to, do that for you. Now, of course, what happens if you need to add some custom configuration? You need to add some rules to that build. So of course you can do it. So we will need to create a next.config file. So after we create it, Next is going to try to find this file, and it's going to apply whatever custom logic you're adding to it. And it's going to look just like this. Don't worry, we're going to do it right now. So okay, first we need to create a next.config.js. So I'm going to go right here to the root directory. It needs to be on root. And I'm going to do a new file, and it's going to be called next.config.js. Right. So now Next is going to look for this file. So what we need to do, we need to let the application know that whenever we start it, we want to apply some logic. What do we want to do? Well, we want to bring this const called with.css, and we are requiring the file. And notice that we are using required and not import. And this is because we are, going through Node. Okay, so we have the CSS. This variable, it uses this. Okay, so then we need to do a module exports and export it with CSS. That's it. That's the only thing we need to do. All right, pretty simple. Now, this file, it's going to look pretty small, but in the future, as we advance through the sections, this is going to get much bigger because we need to add a lot of plugins. We need to do several things. Okay, so now if we start Next again, it's going to build everything, and it's going to know that we want to use CSS and modules as an import. Right. So I'm going to start the application. I'm going to do npm run dev. And all right, whenever this is ready, I'm going to go back to our application. And now what we can do, we can import CSS. Now, if you have some experience with the Create React app, you know that when you create an application with React with a CLI, you get the src directory, which is where you have all your components, all your React code. And then outside of the src, you get a public directory, which is, pretty much like the static directory we have right here. So if you want to import from the src files from the static or the public directory, you're not going to be able to do it. So right now, what we want to do, we want to import a CSS and use it right here. So we cannot just add it from static. We need to create a new directory, and you can call this whatever you want. And you can call this, I don't know, styles, whatever, doesn't matter. So inside the styles, I'm just going to put, I don't know, a main CSS. And I'm going to put a class called, I don't know, super, then awesome, something like that. And I'm going to put something dumb inside, maybe a background of red. That's good. All right. So now we have CSS. We have enabled the usage of CSS as modules or as an import. So now we need to use it. So I'm going to go maybe to the index. Why not? Yeah, why not? I'm going to go to the index. And I'm going to say, okay, welcome to my page, guys. Okay, I'm going to add a class. So I'm going to add a class name. And I'm going to say that we want to use this super awesome style. All right. Of course, this is not going to work because we are using CSS as an import. We need to import it at the top, right? That's the whole idea. So let me go back to home. All right. So I'm going to go right here at the top, and we need to import the CSS. So import and, // we need to go to styles / and then main CSS. And notice that when you import CSS like this, you need to provide the extension. Okay, so if we go, we get the styles. So very cool. Now, remember that if we don't do the configuration and the installation, this will not work. You don't have this ability. So what happens if you want to use you want to use this file as a module, right? Just like we are doing right here. So by default, you cannot do it. If I go and right here at the top and say, I want to use my style, I don't know, I'm just going to give whatever name, style, and it's going to be from, and then I go at the bottom and say, okay, so now this style, it's going to be equal to, that name, my style, and then super awesome, which is this one, that should work because we are using it as a module. This is another way of using CSS. If I go, nothing happens. And this is because this file, it's really important. We need to tell with CSS that now we want to use it as a module. So what we do, we pass an object and we pass some rules. So we're going to say CSS and then modules, and then we are going to enable to true. Now all of this is on the documentation, all right? So right here, let me find it. With export with CSS modules, we have it right here. So now if I go home and I reload the application, I'm pretty sure I made a mistake. So let me just go back. Oh no, of course, it's because, it's actually good that this happened. It says, found a change in Next.config.js. Restart the server to see the changes in effect. So when you make a change on the actual server, right? Next will not detect this change and it will not restart your server. Now, for now, we are just going to restart and start the server manually. Later, much later, I'm going to give you a way to make the server restart itself when you make a change. So, okay, so we have a new change. We need to kill the server and start it again. All right. So after we do, compiling, and if we go to home, we get pretty much the same result. So pretty cool stuff. Now with the other ones, I'm not going to show you because it's the same idea. We need to install, for example, with less, we install it, then we do with less instead of with CSS, we make the export, and that's it. Then of course, we just need to create a less file and import it and then use it, right? Just we get the example right here. And of course, what next is going to do all the build-up and it's going to convert that less file to regular CSS. Same thing with Sass, and same thing with stylus. I don't know how stylus works. I don't know this one. I don't have to learn everything that comes out, of course. Okay, so pretty cool stuff. Now, on each section we know a little bit more, but we still need to learn a lot of things. Okay, so let's go to the next one. And I'm thinking that I'm going to make this application. We are going to make this application a little bit better. So let's go to the next one and, pimp this. All right, so most of the times in your applications in real life, you would want to pass params to routes or query params or to add some kind of dynamic route parameter to your application, to other routes. So with just React and WithRouter, we could do that, in a simple way. But now Next is in charge of the routes. So we need to do things a little bit different. So first, what I want to do, I want to go to the index.js and use this as an example. We're going to create a more realistic example. So we're going to get, instead of the users and the user number 1, we're going to get pretty much a list of users. I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to go here and say console log this state. And remember that we are passing user data and user data, user data. So we are passing pretty much whatever we get from the server. So if we go to user data, I'm getting one single user, and it's because maybe I need to restart it. All right. So user data, now we get a long list of users. We get 10. That's cool. So that's okay. So now since we are passing everything and we are getting it inside the user data with this props, we could catch this, create a loop, and show a list. That's the idea. So I'm going to create maybe a function, render users, and then list, and actually user list. Or could be users list, but that's okay. So we're going to return some JSX. So I need to be using parentheses. So what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to call this function, and I'm going to be passing the users. And this is going to be equal to the user data. So, okay, I'm going to go right here, maybe below the welcome guys. I'm just going to delete this and going to say pick up user, pick up a user, or pick a user. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, of course, we're going to create a list. So I need to create an UL. I'm going to add a class name. And again, we're going to use Bootstrap. I'm going to say list and then group. All right. So inside here, we're going to return the whole list. So I need to make a reference to this. That's that render list. This is the function, render list. And we need to be passing what we want to loop, which is the user data, right? So I'm going to say this. That props, or actually we could use the state since we have it right there, that state, that user data. We could use props, I'm just going to delete this because we are injecting everything as props. There's just makes no sense to use a state. So I'm going to say props. All right, so that props at user data. So now this render user list, it's getting the list of users. So I'm going to go here and say, users dot, and we're going to map. Okay, so on each iteration, we're going to get a user, and I'm going to wrap it like this because I want to get the index. So I'm going to say user and the index, and then, of course, we run a function. And this function returns JSX, so we need to use parentheses. So then, of course, we return an li, and the only thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to show the iteration, which is the number, the index. So we get 10, is an array, so it starts on 0, so we get 10 results. That's cool, it's working. So of course, I'm going to delete this and we're going to make it better. We need to add a class name, and this one is going to be list group and then item. And just to avoid the warning, we're going to be passing the key. And again, this is just React. Okay, since we want a link, I'm going to bring a link right here. Now, where do we want to go? We're going to do it in a second. But first, I'm going to add the A, which is what are we going to say on that link. So right here, I want to display the name. Since we are looping this, I'm going to say users, user, and then name. All right, so this is inside the object. And of course, I need to be passing an href. So if I do that, we're going to get that warning right there. Oh, it says link not defined. It's because we are not bringing link the top. Remember, we need to bring link. So we're going to go and it's import link with a capital L, link from, and if you remember, it's next / and then link. All right. So now, we get it. So very cool. Okay, so now we're going to keep moving forward on this. I had to restart pause the video and restart the VS Code. It was doing some weird things. So now what we want to do, we want to be passing this, and I'm going to go back to the previous example, which is what we have. We need to achieve that, but I'm going to do it with you. It's just like I had to, go back in time and stop the video and restart the VS Code. But that's okay. I'm pretty sure you have the hashtag, right, just like this. So of course, we need to be passing the location, and we're going to do that. We're going to be passing the route. So we're going to go to users, we're going to go to profile, and we're going to go and pass the query strings. So I'm going to say that we want a user and then an ID of the user and the ID, right? So now, of course, if we go here, reload the application and go to profile, goes to profile and we are passing the user ID. Of course, we know that works. We are kind of hard coding everything, but that's okay. Now we need to go to profile and I'm going to delete this. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to delete this as well. I'm going to make this a class-based component all over again. So profile, extends, and then component. And then of course we need to do the render, we need to do the return, and of course we need to return something. Now I'm going to be adding the main layout and we're going to add them to all the sections as we go. So let me just copy the main layout right here. All right, so I'm going to copy paste and then I'm going to copy paste and close it. Now the return needs to return some JSX, so I need to change that as well. Okay, so of course we're going to get something. I'm going to say something, doesn't matter right now. Let me just reload the application and fail to compile, cannot resolve, and it's of course because we need to do the /. All right, so okay, that's good. Now the main question is, how do we get this value? So of course you could add some JavaScript right here on this class and bring it, right? But again, why are we doing this? Since we get the static and we get the get initial props, right? That's the whole idea, get initial and then props. All right. So in this function, of course, we're going to catch the ID and then we're going to do a request to the server to bring that information. So of course, we need to do async. Now on the props, we get something, we have access to the context, and inside the context, we get access to the query, which is, pretty much what we are passing right here. So for now, of course, we need to return something. So I'm going to say return, we return an empty object, and I'm just going to do console log, and going to console log the query. Okay, let's see what we get. I'm going to go back, start all over, and I'm going to go to the first one, and we get the console log with an object notation of user ID, which is, right here. And then we get the value on an object. So pretty cool, pretty easy. Now I'm going to do something else because you have different ways of passing params. So I'm going to go, or queries in this case. I'm going to delete all of this. I'm going to start again because if not, it's going to be a little bit confusing. So we are passing, of course, this. What we need to pass is an object. Now you can pass two separate things. And again, all is in the documentation. I'm going to be passing a path name, which is the actual path name. It's users / and then profile, right? All right, profile. And then, of course, if I do just this and I click it, we click on it, we're going to go to user's profile. Still works. But in this one, what you can do, you can use it on a more organized way. Instead of path name, what you're going to use, it's query. And query uses an object. So right here, you can pass the user ID and you can, do it on a more organized way. So if I reload the application, go back, let me go back to home, reload the application, I'm going to pick a user and we get the user ID of 1 and we are still, getting pretty much the same result. Cool. Okay, so what do we need to do now? Well, what we're going to do, we're going to catch the ID that we are getting from the profile. We're going to make a request, just like we did on the index. We're going to bring the information about that user, and then we're going to be passing that information as props to this component. So let's do that right now. So I'm going to go at the top, and I'm going to import Axios because we are going to use it. So Axios from, and then Axios. All right. Okay, so now, of course, I'm going to delete this, go right here, and at the end of the day, we're going to get a user back from the server. So what we're going to do? Well, we're going to do a try and a catch. Right. So we're going to have a URL, which is going to be the response, could be request or whatever you want to call it. Most of the times I use it request, but right now it makes more sense to use a response. So I'm going to do await, and I'm going to use Axios, right? Okay. We're going to do some getting. Now I'm going to copy the URL from here. Let me copy, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to paste it right here. All right. Okay. So where do we want to go? We want to go to users. We want to get all the users? No, I want to get a particular user. Where do we have the information? Well, we have it on query, and since this is an object, we can access the user ID, right? So now, okay, this looks nice. What do we want to do? Well, from this one, we are going to get a response. So we're going to say that the user is equal to that response, and then of course we access the data. Now, of course, if we get an error, console error, whatever, doesn't matter, and then error. That's okay. And of course, on the catch, we need to do error. All right. So now, instead of returning nothing, what are we going to be passing? It's the user that we get right here at the top. Since we are async and awaiting, we're going to get the user. Okay, so let's make sure we get the user, console log, and we're going to do this .props, right? All right. So I'm going to reload it, see what happens, and we get a user with the ID of, I don't know, Leon Graham. That's okay. And then we get this URL. We're going to talk about that in a second. So, okay, so we get the user. So now we can grab that information and show it right here. And of course, we are going to do something simple, not hard. So I'm going to create a function. Let me create the function first, because I like to show things on functions. So user, show user. This one, of course, will return some JSX. So I'm going to do it just like this. And on this one, we're going to be passing a user. And what we're going to do, you're going to return just a div that has a name. Let me make it better, a name. Then I'm going to make it on one line, because if not, it's going to get too big. So we're going to be passing the name. Then we're going to be passing the last name and maybe the email. All right. So now we need to call this function and pass the information we have, right? Okay, so I'm going to go here and say that we want to use this and the show user, open and close, and this that props the user. Since we are passing and getting props from user, we're going to be passing just the user. All right. So now, of course, I'm going to reload it just in case. We get nothing, and I'm going to go here, and we need to bring the user. We need to bring the name, and let's see if we get something. All right, man, we get it. Ugly, but again, we get it. Okay. So then the username, we're going to get the phone, and I'm going to be getting maybe the email. So user and then email. All right. Looks nice. Maybe add some space or something like that. Either way, we don't get it, but that's okay. Okay. So, looks nice. So working with this is, as you can see, pretty easy. I'm going to add a break right here. So I can, add that. So, okay, a little bit better. Okay, so now I want to give you some feedback on this URL. So whenever you do this props in this section on the profile.js, remember that the profile, it's part of the pages. So by default, you get a prop injected in your component called URL. So on this one, you get a lot of information, and some information is the same you get on the get initial props. You get the as path, you get the back, the path name, and the query and everything else. So you can get it from there. Now, I gotta tell you, the documentation of Next says that this URL is going to be deprecated, or maybe some properties of the URL are going to be deprecated. So you shouldn't use it. If you're using this version, the one we are using right now, you do have access to this, but maybe you're watching this in the future and this one was removed. So you shouldn't use it. That's okay. Okay, so let's go to the next one, and we're going to talk, instead of using query strings, we're going to do something else, but with parameters. Okay, so sometimes just passing queries is not enough. You will want to pass parameters. So parameter is going to be something like profile / and then maybe the ID of the user. Now the thing is that, of course, we are not going to create file JS with the ID of the user. We need to load this in a more dynamic way. We're going to still be rendering the profile, but the URL changes. If I go to this one, of course, we go to a page not found because we don't have something like that on the pages. We don't have a 234.js. So what we need to do, again, we need to do things a little bit more dynamic. And it's going to be a little bit weird. And at one point, it's not going to work. But don't worry, I'm going to give you the solution. Now, before we move forward, I would like to make some changes to the profile. I would like to add maybe an H1 tag right here saying users and profile, actually user profile, just to make it a little bit better, profile. All right. Okay, that's better. And I'm going to add the break at the top. Okay, so now, of course, we need to go to this location and we need to pass things on a different way. So I'm going to go to the index. Oh, and one more thing. I'm gonna go here. I'm going to reload the page on maybe contact, right? Reload the page. Now, if I go home, it's not working. And if I click it on this one, which is home as well, it's not going. And it's not something that it's wrong with you. It's a bug with this version of Next. This bug was with the earlier versions of Next, the 7. something. It got fixed and now it just came back. I was trying for a solution, couldn't find it. I'm gonna find it, don't worry, and I'm gonna tell you, of course, how to fix this. There's a lot of people asking for the same fix. But again, I will find a fix for this and I will just tell you. It only happens with when you go to a /. All the other routes are happening. There's something wrong with /, but that's okay. Okay, so I'm gonna go to home. For now, I'm gonna do it this way, and we need to change a little bit in how this link works. So I'm gonna go to index, and I'm gonna go to that link. So now what we need to do is that we are saying that okay, whenever we click on the link, we want to go to that to this href, and we know that that works. All right. So we are going to the path name profile, and we are passing the query string. All right. Okay. What happens if I do something like this? I'm going to go and say query string, and then, of course, we need to be passing the user ID. I'm going to change this to a template strings, all right? And I'm going to say user ID. So what is going to happen? I'm going to reload the application, going to go to Leanne Graham, and we get page not found. And again, it's because of the same reason. We don't have a JavaScript file just for the one, all right? It's trying to find something like that on pages, and we don't have it. So we need to do things on a different way. I'm just going to go back to this previous example. Query, and we are passing the user ID. So what we get is a different property called as. So I'm gonna do it, and then I'm gonna explain you, because if not, it's gonna be a little bit weird. I'm gonna say /. I'm gonna say users. I'm gonna say profile, /, and then the user ID. I'm gonna say user.id. Okay. So now if I reload the application and go to Leanne Graham, we get it. And we are getting, of course, the URL. It's that simple. And okay, so how is this working? Well, maybe you don't know, but this is how a single page application works. What you see on the URL, it's just for show. We are not really changing the URL, because when you change the URL on a browser, the browser, what it's going to do is going to reload the page just like this, right? And that's not happening. Since we are working with a single page application, we are still working with a single page application, the page will not reload. So there's something called browser history that it's changing what you see right here. And again, this is just for show. It's just to give you information of where are you going. But it's not really happening. Everything is, fictional. So, again, what we are doing, we are really going to path name, users, and profile, and we are still passing the query ID. That's why this still works. But since we are passing the as, we are telling, okay, we really want to go here, but on the browser history, which is the URL, I want you to show this URL instead. So what we are doing, we are just masking the URL with a fictional URL. We're masking the real one with a fake one. That's the only thing we are doing. And, this seems to be working. But we have one problem. All right, so let me show you the problem. I'm going to kind of start over. I'm going to go start over. I'm going to reload the application. I'm just reloading from home, okay? So I'm going to go to the first user, And okay, we get the user. And if we go back, we can go back. And if we go forward, we can go forward. So far, so good. Everything works. And this is because we are starting our application on home. I reload the page and I go home. So Next knows that when we go to /, which is home, we just load a file called index.js, which is this one. It knows that you need to go to pages, find this one, and load it. So if we go to, contact, it's going to go to pages, find the contact.js, and show whatever logic you have there. All right. If I go home, and again, go to the user, it works. Now, if I reload the application from within users, profile, and one, Next is going to say, oh, okay, so this dude is trying to go to users, profile, and one. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to pages and find the page called one.js. And of course, we don't have it. So we get a page not found. And again, this just makes sense, because when we are at home, Next knows that when we click on this link, it's passing all of this logic along in the memory of the browser. But when we reload the application, we are accessing directly, so Next does not know that this exists because this component never really loaded. So again, we can use this. This is still usable if the user loads the application on a different place. If they load it directly, not gonna work. So for this one, we don't have a fix. There's nothing we can do from here. What we need to do, we need to instruct the server, Next.js, to handle this kind of requests, to tell the server if a person uses this, they try to load the application with user's profile and maybe a param that it's dynamic. What we want to do is we want to show the profile component, which is this one, right? So we need to instruct the server. Just like we get next.config.js, that we can modify some default behavior of Next.js when it builds this, this project. We have a way to instruct Next and this server, instruct the server in how to handle this type of requests. And we, of course, do it manually, and we do it with Express. And this is, of course, the topic of the next section. We're going to see how we can add a file, of course, right here, and tell Next that we want to use that file to modify the default behavior of the server, right? Okay, so that's enough. That's okay. Let's go to the next one, and we're going to talk about that. All right, so now we know that we need to fix this. Of course, if we go to this location, everything loads because we are coming from home. But if we go here to this very specific URL and we reload the page, we need to add some server-side support. Now, if you go to the documentation, you can find everything right here on the main docs and the learn, server-side support for clean URLs. Of course, I'm not just going to give you the docs. I'm going to show you how to do it. So just going to go back to home. And what we need to do first, we need to install Express. And yeah, maybe you're thinking, why using Express if you're using Next.js? Well, what we do, we install Express and we use it to give some custom support for some very specific URLs, just like this ones. Everything is going to be handled by Next, right? Everything is going to still be handled by Next. But we can add Express to tell the application in how to handle very specific URLs. And again, if you have some Express knowledge, this is going to be pretty easy. So first, we need to install Express. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to kill just everything. I'm going to do clear. And I'm going to do npm install. And of course, you should do the same. -- save, and then Express. All right. So again, if you don't know Express, Express is like a library we can use to create a server with Node.js. So yeah, what we do is just we use both and we link them together. That's the idea. So I'm going to do clear, and now we have one problem because we are still using Next, but we want to use Express. So we need a file right here in our project where we're going to be telling Next.js what we need to do with this Express server. So for this one, and again, I'm going to put it right here. You could put it inside of a directory, and maybe later on the practice project, we're going to do that. But for now, I'm just going to put it right here on the root. Most of the times, since you're going to be adding a lot of things to the server, custom things to the server, like Mongo and things like that, you will create a new directory where we're going to put everything. But for now, we're just going to do just the server, so I'm just going to put it right here. All right, so now we have a file, server.js, and we're going to put all the Express logic right here. Now what we need to do is to modify the package.json. So when we start the application, we are telling Next to start Next and not to look for a different file. So now what we want to do, we want to start from this server.js, and we want to start with Next and Express, but we need to change this command. So I'm going to do node underscore env, and then we're going to say production. And this is very standard for Express. And then I'm going to say I want to start on the production, I want to start a node, and I want to start with server.js. So this command will, of course, look for a file called server.js, and it will trigger our application from this server, right? And again, this is on start. Same thing is going to happen with server. So whenever we do start, we start things in a production mode. But right now we are working on a development server, so we just need to change this again. So on dev, we're going to say we want to start node, but we want to start it from the server.js and not from Next anymore. Next build stays the same. All right. So now if we start the application will start, and we'll start from this server.js. Of course, we need to do a bunch of things right here. If not, nothing is going to work. Okay, so the first thing is to bring Express to this file and to bring Next. Right. So I'm going to say const Express, and this one, it's equal to require, open and close, and we require Express. Right. So Express, it's on this file. Then, since we're going to use it with Next, I'm going to bring Next. I'm going to say require, and then we require Next. Pretty much same idea. All right, so now we have both in this file. So now what we need to do is we need to create a variable that will tell us the environment we are currently at. If we are in production or are we on development server. So I'm just going to call it dev. And again, this is just standard. So I'm going to say process.env. We're going to enter the process.env of node, and I'm going to ask node what is the environment. So if this is environment, it's different than production. Of course, dev, it's going to be true. Now, if we run our development server, just like we're going to do it in a couple minutes with dev, of course, dev, it's going to be true because we are not inside production. And if we are on production, of course, this is going to be false. So it will change pretty much the logic, what we're going to do right now. Now, if you have some experience with the Express, you know that when you want to start an Express server, you create a variable called app, and you just pass Express, and then you create an instance of Express. And everything that happens with app is going to work with Express. Well, the thing is, right now, what works on top of everything is going to be Next, not Express. So instead of using the app with Express, we're going to use Next. Now, Next, what it's going to need, it's an object that says, where we are. In this case, it's going to be dev, which is going to be true. If not, of course, this is false. It's going to be production. But right from the start, we just need to tell. And then I'm going to create a new variable, and this is going to be called handled. So the handle, it's pretty much the next project handling all the requests. You're gonna see it in action in a second. So inside app, when we use Next inside this instance, we get something that calls get request handler, and this is the one that it's gonna be handling pretty much all the routes. And again, don't worry, we're gonna see it in action in a second. All right. So what do we need to do right now? Well, again, we are still using Next. So when we start Next, we say app because we have an instance of Next inside app, and we use prepare. Let me see if I can find it, and not the build ID, app.prepare. There we go. And then, of course, this is a function. So this one will return something. So we will catch it on the then. And other than, what we're going to do, we just run a function. All right. So now what is happening right now is that we are starting the next application from here. But what we are saying, okay, so whenever you create a next instance, I want to pass here some custom rules. And what are going to be the custom rules? Well, the server of Express. So I'm going to say const server equals Express. All right, that's it for now. Now, since you get it then, you're going to get a catch. So I'm going to say catch, open and close. And then again, we just run the same function, just a different function. Now, if you have an error, you're going to catch it right here. So if we do get an error, I'm just going to, do the usual. We're going to catch that error and we're going to send it to the stack of errors inside Node. All right. And then, of course, I'm going to say process, just like this, exit, and we're going to kill everything. All right. And I'm going to say 1. That's it. That's it for now. This is not really important right now. Now, what we need to do is that when we do this, we are starting a next application. Everything is going to be the same. And then, of course, when we run next, we're going to run some additional custom, route, some additional custom logic. And in this case, it's going to be just Express. Now, what is going to happen is that next, before going and doing all the routes and everything else, just, showing the routes just like we were actually using it, is going to go through here. It's going to, of course, handle everything, but that first is going to go through here. It is going to look all the specific custom rules you're going to be adding. So in this case, I'm just going to add the server.listen. So we can listen for a very specific port. In this case, it's going to be the 3000. This is in the future, it's going to change just a little bit. So when we listen for the port 3000, we're going to run just a function. This function might get an error. And if we get an error, and this is, just very common Express. I'm going to throw, and I'm going to, throw an error. If not, we're going to do what we were doing before, but in a different way. I want to console log, and I want to say ready on port 3000, or we can actually say localhost 3000. And again, this is going to change. It's going to change in a few minutes. So I'm going to say, okay, we are running on a development server, so we are running on localhost 3000. And again, we need to change this in the future because if we run this in production, this is going to kick in and it's going to try to run it on the 3000, and maybe in production, we are going to run on a different port. And again, later we're going to change it. For now, we're just going to leave it. So if we try to run this, nothing really is going to work. And actually, we can prove that. So I'm gonna do pretty much the same thing than before. I'm going to do npm run dev. So we're going to run the server.js. And let's see what happens. I'm going to press enter. And it's going to attempt to do something, compiling, ready on port, and notice that we are getting the message that we are specifying right here. So it kind of, it's kind of working. So if I go maybe to home, let's say we go to home, and I reload the application, we are getting cannot get. And again, if you have some experience with Express, you know that when you don't have a route, with Express, you're going to get this, cannot get. And it's because the Express server, it's not finding any route that will match your home. So what is happening again is that we are starting a next application, but next, it's not kind of a handling the routes anymore. It's using the Express server to handle the routes. It's kind of a delegating the task to Express. Now, since we need for next to handle the routes that are inside pages, we need to specifically say right here, next, handle the routes. How do we do so? Well, I'm going to say again, server, and I'm going to say I want to get. Now, which routes we want for the next server to handle? Well, we want all the routes, so we put a star. And then we're going to use a request and response. We just provide a response. This one has a request and has a response. Now, what do we want to do? Well, the only thing we want to do here is we want to return something. And this return is going to be us saying, next, go and handle that route. Since we made right here an instance of get request handler, so we're going to do that. We're going to say return handle, request, and response. So when we get here, next is going to know that it needs to, handle that route. Since, again, we are going home, of course, we need to restart the server. All right, so almost done. I'm going to go here, and if I reload the application, everything works. So again, we are adding some custom rules to the actual routes, right? Okay, so when Next enters here, is not going to handle any kind of route unless we say so. So whenever you get a request, any kind of request, go and handle it with this, with the handle const. All right. So now the question is that, how can we provide some custom information just like this? Because right now we are telling Next to handle all the routes. Well, this one, we are telling Next to handle all the routes, but what we can do, we can add some very specific rules right here at the top. And if that route gets matched, the application will use whatever logic we put right here, and it will not use this one. So what we want to do is that now if we want to reload the application on a very specific route, just like this, we want to do some custom logic. What do we want to do? Well, again, we want to listen for the server and we want to listen for a route. And then of course, this is going to be the route. And what we're going to get is we're going to trigger, a function with a request and a response. So at the end of the day, we always do something. All right. So cool. So now what is the route? Well, the route, it's inside users, just like this, inside profile, / and then remember we have a dynamic value, right? A dynamic ID. So on this one, we need to provide a column, and in this case, we just say ID. So now whenever a user reloads the page or go to this location, and pretty much when reloads the page, it's going to go not to this one, will not go to Next, it's going to go, and do this one, right? That's the idea. All right, of course, still nothing is going to happen. If I kill the server and I run it again, we will, again, get pretty much the same problem. So if I reload the page, it's going to keep loading. And this is because if it entered this logic right here, but since we are not sending any kind of response, it's going to stop and start, it's hanging. It's just staying there and awaiting a response. And at the end of the day, of course, this will fail because it didn't get any kind of response from the server. So we need to send an actual response. What do we need to do? Well, I'm going to create two consts. I'm going to say actual page, this one. All right. So on this one, we're going to provide what is the page we want to render when the user enters to this location directly. Well, if you remember, it's profile. It's just this one. So I'm going to say, okay, so I want to go to users / and actually it's / users, and then profile. All right. And then what I'm going to do, and of course I need to, there we go. And then what I need to do, I'm going to use the app. I'm going to go and say render because I want to render something. And we're going to render several things. I'm going to be passing the request. I'm going to be passing the response. And I'm going to say that we want to go to the actual page. Now, if we do something like this, and let me just kill the server and start again. This is going to, of course, it's going to work. And I'm going to go home first. All right. If we go here through the link, that works. And if I reload the application, it's going to go to profile and it says cannot read a property name of undefined. And this is because when we go from home to that location, we are passing, we are trying to get the information about this user. And since we are not providing here with the query params, with the user ID and everything else, of course, the application fails. So I'm going to pass the params. I'm going to say query, then params. What do we need to do? Well, we are using the user ID as a param. Right. What is the ID? Well, whatever we get right here. So I'm going to access the request. I'm going to access the params, and this is, just a express. And I'm going to say I want to be passing the ID. And if you, of course, want to add more things, you can totally do it. So I'm going to say, hey, I don't know, whatever. And this one, of course, is going to go on the third argument. So now if I kill the server and restart it again, and let's try again, I'm going to go home. I'm going to do it like this, and we know it works. And if I reload the application, still works. But this the time when I reload the page, what is happening is this one. What we are really doing is telling the application to render this logic, this route, which contains the profile and everything else, and we are passing the params, right? And when we pass the params, the profile will detect that we have a user ID, and it will just show the information we want. So again, we are pretty much doing the same thing that the Next server is doing with React, but we are kind of giving custom instructions. Just when the server restarts, when the user starts on that location. If, of course, the user has no way to enter directly, to enter to this route directly, there's just no point in doing this. But this is the way we get to add some custom rules to different routes or very specific routes. You just use Express. You put the route and then you do whatever you want and you render what you really want to render. And that's it, And notice that we are still getting a lot of information right here at the bottom. All right, okay. So now let's go to the next one. Of course, later, maybe in a different section, we're gonna expand all this server.js file. It's gonna get pretty big, so we're gonna do a lot of things right here. I just wanted to give you just some some basics of this. Okay, so let's go to the next one and talk about a different thing. Okay, so we're gonna leave this server, the server thing for a minute. And I want to talk about something else. I'm gonna close this. We are not gonna need it right now. I'm gonna go back to that later. So now what I want to talk about the WithRouter property we get with the Next. So as you know, when we start an application and we go to an actual component, this one gets rendered with whatever we get inside pages. And this page, the page we have right here, let's say that we go to maybe the about. This one has direct access to know what is going on with the URL and everything else, because this one gets information about the route. For example, right now, if we go to the other one, we can see that we get the user and we get the URL with all the information. So we get that by default. So what happens if I wanted to use a different component? I wanted to get access to that information, but not from a file or maybe a component that it's inside pages. I want to access from maybe an include or something like that. Let me create first the example, and then I'm going to tell you how to fix it. I'm going to go to includes and create just a component called message. You can call it whatever you want. Doesn't matter. Not really important. Okay, so I'm going to go to the message.js, and I'm going to import React from, and then of course React. All right. So then I'm just going to create a functional component called message. This one, it's going to be equal to something. We are going to be getting some props, and then we want to return some JSX, right? The usual stuff. So I'm going to create a fragment, right? And then inside, I'm just going to say, I don't know, I'm going to create maybe a div that says hello. And then I'm just going to add some other thing. I'm going to create a div, and this one is going to say I am the, and I'm going to put right here, and then I'm going to say page. So what I want to do, I want to access the location, the URL we get, the path we get at the top, and I want to put it right here. That's pretty simple. Then of course we need to export default and then message. So of course we don't have that information, so for now I'm just going to put ... All right? Okay, so now we have this component. So what I want to do, I'm going to go to the about.js, and I'm going to bring that message component so we can use it from here. All right, so that / components includes, and one more time, and we include the message. And then I'm going to copy the message, go right here at the bottom, and say I want to display the message component. Right? Pretty simple. So if I go to the about us, we get hello, and I am the whatever page. All right, again, pretty simple. So what I want to do, I want to show the path right here. So there's two ways you can do it. You can, since you get by default the information about the path on a component that it's inside pages, you can grab it from here, from the initial props and everything else, and just pass it as props to the message component. And then of course right here you get it as props, and then you put it right here. That's one way to do it. But sometimes just doing all of that, it's a lot of work. What if you have several components that need the URL? So you're gonna need to pass it as props on all the components inside the about. All right, that makes no sense. So what you get is you get a way to get information about the route from different components that are not inside pages. And this is a module that we need to install. We need to bring right here from Next and Router. So we need to import, and we use a little bit of destructuring, and the module calls WithRouter. So router, just like this. And we need to bring it from Next, just like this, and Router. Right. So this one will give us pretty much the same access we get with a kind of a native component. We can access with WithRouter, and it will inject as props all the information about that route. Just by bringing it right here, nothing is going to happen. This is a high order component. So what we need to do is we need to wrap our own component with WithRouter. So I'm going to say WithRouter, and I'm going to say that we want to inject the props inside the message component. So now if I do something crazy like props, because everything gets injected inside props, dot, I'm going to say router, just like this, dot, and I want to get the path name because that's what we want to get. We should be getting it right here. And we do, we get the about, right? And of course you get a lot of things, not just the path name, you get a bunch of things, just like we're getting right here. So let me just do console log, and I'm going to do props just to, to inspect what we get. I'm going to reload it, and we get a router property, just an object, and inside we get pretty much the same thing than the other one. The as path, we get the path name, and then we get a push. We're going to talk about this one in a minute. So you get the route, right? So you get a bunch of information that might be really, really, really useful in the future. For example, let's say that you have queries. Right now we don't have queries, but this one will give you the query string you have right here at the top. Right, really, really cool. Now I'm going to show you one more thing. So let's say that, for example, what I want to do from here, I want to add a link, but I don't want to bring a link, the link component from the top, because we don't really have it. We can have it, but not really. But okay, so I want to add a link. So with the WithRouter, we get a function right here that says push. So if we use this function, what we can do, we can assign a function to push, you use this function push to redirect your user to a different web page, right? Let's say that we want to go to the profile web page. So we can totally do it. I'm going to go here at the bottom. I'm going to add just a div, and this one is going to say click, and I'm going to add a span, just a span, something simple. And this one is going to say here, and then to read more, doesn't matter. So on this one, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add an onClick listener. So onClick equals to, of course, we need to open and close. And I'm going to say that I want to run a function called const and handler. You can call it, again, you can call this whatever you want. Doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do, whenever I click this, I just want to run the function. Now the function, what it's going to do is going to send the user, it's going to push the user to a new location. Since we have the routes information inside props, what we could do is props.router, we need to access router, and then we do dot, and we do push, right? We just invoke that function. And then we just pass the information of where we want to go. So in this case, we need to add a path name, and the path name is going to be / users and then profile. I'm just sending the user to the same location. Remember that the profile needs the user ID in order to work. So I'm going to add some query string. So I'm going to use the user ID. If you remember, it was just like that. It's going to be the number 1. And then what you can do as a second argument to the push, you can pass the custom URL. What's going to be rendered right here, what's going to show on the URL. Remember that we don't show it just like this. We need to show profile / and the ID of the user. So in this case, it's again users.profile. Let's go again, profile. / and then the number 1. And again, if we think about this, we are pretty much doing the same thing like here. All right. So if we click there, we should be going to this section. So if I reload the application and go to click here, we just go to the profile and we load the information about the user. So, again, just a different way of linking, give it a link to a user to go to a different section. Because sometimes you just cannot use a link. You just need a regular component and to do something whenever the user clicks on it. So this is going to be pretty much the way we do it. Okay, so we know now that we get the WithRouter high order component, just like this, to get access to some router properties so we can push and, get information. We know we can do it on components that are not inside the pages directory. Now, what happens if we wanted to do the same on a component that is inside the pages already? So we cannot use the WithRouter. The WithRouter was designed to be used on components that are not inside pages. Now, with the other components, what we get is this one. I was testing it. Is we get the router. So I'm going to go to router, and I'm going to go to from, and we're going to bring it from next, and then router. So pretty much we get the same abilities we get with the WithRouter, but with the router. Now, instead of course of making a mention to WithRouter and wrap everything as a high order component, we just can grab it and use it inside our component. Remember that this one is already linked to the routes. So let's say that I wanted to do the same thing than here. I just wanted to do an on-click and go someplace. All right, so I'm going to go here. Maybe just going to add a break so we can add some separation. And I'm going to say, again, I'm just going to add a span. I want to do an on-click. So let me do the on-click first. And I'm going to add some text like, I don't know, click me now, something dumb. So on this one, I just want to trigger a function. So what I want to do, I want to redirect the user to a different place. So I'm going to use the router. Oh, sorry for that. That was my phone. Let me just, bring it down. So I need to have a password. I live in a dangerous country. So, okay. So every time we do the on-click, I'm going to go to router and we pretty much do the same thing. I'm going to do push. Where do we want to push it? Well, I'm going to go, I don't know, where do we want to go? I'm not going to send the user back to users. Let's say that we want to go to maybe the contact page. Makes sense? And of course, it's going to break. So I'm going to go to contact. I believe we get the contact just like that. All right, so it should be working. So I'm going to go to the About Us. And if we click Me Now, we go to the contact. Right, really cool. We could go to users, of course, and do pretty much the same thing we did before. So profile, and remember that this one needs an ID. So we go to About Us and click Me Now, we go to the user's profile. Now, just like I told before, you get pretty much all the properties and all the functions and everything else that you get with the WithRouter, pretty much the same. So I'm going to do it on the component did mount. I'm going to say component did mount, open and close. I'm going to say I want to console.log and I want to console log the router, right? I just want just that. I'm going to go to the About Us and we get the router and we get pretty much all the same properties, but we get some additionals, right? We get for example, the before pop state. I'm going to show you that in a minute. So you get some other functions that, could be useful. So for example, if we wanted to get the path name, just like with the before, we say path name and you're going to get it. Let's say that you want to get the queries. In this case, we don't get the query, but you would do something like query and you're going to get the queries. Right now, we don't have any, but that's okay. I'm going to show you the before pop state because of all all this this one is a little bit weird. So I want to show you this one. So on this one, what we can do, we can, for example, check if the user goes back or forward and, just inspect what's going on, or we can decide what's going to happen. I know it's a little bit weird. Let me just show you. I'm going to go here and I'm going to make a reference to router and I'm going to use that function before pop state. Open and close. So what we're going to do right here is that we trigger a function, just a callback function. And this callback functions, of course, is going to get a lot of properties right here. So I'm going to use a little bit of destructuring. What we use right here is the URL, we use the S, and we use the options. I know, again, it's a little bit weird. So what I'm going to do a console log of the URL. So okay, I'm going to reload the application. We get pretty much, a clean environment right here. Let me just comment this once. Let me try again, reload the application. And we get the router, and this is coming from message, right? Let me just comment that out so we can get it out of the way. All right. So I'm going to reload it, and we get nothing. So right by default, this before pop state, it's not running whatever you have right here. Now, if I click backwards, then it's, popping. And notice that the application, it's not reloading. It's giving me the information of what, what's going on in this one. Remember that we do get the user ID and the hello, hey, but again, it's not going back. So this one, again, works just like a React lifecycle. We need to let the application know that we want to go back or, go forward. Depends on, what we want. Okay, so let me show you what we can do right here. So I'm going to go and delete this, right? So with this arguments we get right here, you get the options, of course. We are not going to really use it, but you get the URL and the S, and these ones are really important. The URL, the first one, it's always equal to your current URL. If I go to About Us, my current URL is going to be about, all right, /about. And the S is going to be where are you want to go. If I do / my S is going to be users /profile /1. All right, that's the idea. So what we can do right here is that we need to return true or we need to return false, depending on what we want to do. So I'm going to say if open and close. Now, if the user is trying to, whenever the user clicks on back or forward or whatever, I want to check if where the user wants to go, it's equal, I don't know, contact, for example. So if it is equal to contact, what I want to do is to stop the default behavior of the going back. I want to do something else. I don't want for the browser to go back to contact. I want for the user to reload the application to a different place, maybe location, I don't know, href. And notice I'm doing JavaScript, right? This is not React. I want to send the user to, I don't know, whatever, doesn't matter right now. And of course, what I'm going to do, I'm going to always return false right here because I don't want for the before pop state to go back to the, maybe the previous section. I want for the application to reload the user to a different place. Now, if the case is that the user is trying to go back to a different place that it's not contact, I want to, of course, maybe move forward. I'm going to say return true. So at the end of the day, you always return true. So you only catch the scenario where you're going to be blocking the user or reloading the user or whatever. So in this case, if we are inside About Us, I'm going to reload the application. And if I'm going to go back to contact, I'm not going to let the user pass. Now, notice I've reload the application. So I'm going to go maybe, I don't know, to users, and then I'm going to go to About Us. So if I go back, we should be able to go to users because, again, we are not going back to contact. Now, what happens if I go to contact and then go to About Us? I'm going to go back, and since we are going back to contact, this, of course, should not happen. So if I go back, nothing happens. It's reloading the application to a new place, right? Really, really cool. Now, if you ask me, I've never used this in production or in real life, but it's good to know that we can inspect what the user is trying to do. And it's maybe because you're building something that you're going to do something on contact. Maybe you have some, some information stored right here. And if you move to the next step, the user cannot go back, so you want to clear everything about that. So what you can do, you can set the default location to S, which is, the destination. So let me just give you an example. I'm going to go reload the page. I'm going to go to contact, and I'm going to go to About Us. Okay, so the user, if the user goes back, I'm going to redirect the user back to contact, but notice that this is flashing. So what we are doing is reloading the page to the location that the user wants to go. But again, we are reloading. So if you had some stored information in memory, that it's going to, get wiped. It's going to go away because you're reloading the application. Again, if you go back, it reloads. Right. So I want to show you one more that could be very useful in the future. So you get a replace. So yeah, the replace is just going to replace one URL with another one. So you can use that one as a redirection. So let's again use a mention to router, and I'm just going to use replace. So replace, open and close. So if the user loads this application on the componented mount, I'm just going to do whatever, and then I'm going to trigger the replace. And the replace is where we want to go. Where do we want to redirect the user? So I'm going to replace the current URL with the contact URL. Remember, we are going to be on the About Us. So if I reload it, of course, we are in contact, nothing happens. Now, if I go to the About Us, it's going to, it's going to reload and kick me out back to contact. Now, you could do something else like pass the S path, the S. So for example, it's going to be, I want to send the user back to contact, just like that. But I want to, maybe send it with a query, something like that, or maybe with a param, let's say, 56. So it's going to send it, of course, I'm going to go to About Us, but it's going to send it to contact, but it's going to add a dynamic value like contact 56. Remember that this one is going to be a kind of a masking, just like we discussed previously. So really cool, this one maybe not so useful. These ones are pretty useful. You're going to use them in the future. And this one, again, you are going to use it. You always need, at least on your applications and real life applications, to do maybe 5 or 6 redirections. You always need to do that. It's just pretty common. So this is the way we get to redirect users within the script, not with a link or anything else. All right. So, all of this, it's pretty useful. Now we're going to go to the next topic, to the next section, and we're going to discuss one extra thing we get with this router property, this router module, that it's really awesome. So let's go to the next one and discuss that. Okay, so now we want to talk about router events. So just like React lifecycles, you get route lifecycles, or events in this case. So this works just like JavaScript events. You need to register the event before you can use them. I'm going to go here so we don't get redirected. And I'm going to go back to the About. All right? Pretty simple. Now what I want to register a new event. And I'm going to go and do it maybe at the top. I'm going to say, okay, so when the application starts and then we run the componented mount, I want to access the router and I want to access the events. And of course we get it because we are including the router at the top. So if we want to register an event, we're going to go to the on event. We're going to, set it on right here. We're going to start it. Now, all of this, you can find it on the documentation. If you go to GitHub and you search for the next project, you're going to get a list of all the topics. If you search it for event, you're going to get router events. If you go right here, you're going to get a list of all the events you can use. I'm going to show you 4 of them. And the other ones, actually there's no example with this one on the documentation. And a lot of users are complaining that this one is not working with the latest version of React. But that's okay. We could cover pretty much every scenario with this ones. We don't need this ones. Okay, so I'm going to show you first what we need to do. We need to register the event. So we need to, of course, pass the event. And this is, common JavaScript. I'm going to copy from here so I don't have to type everything again. So it's going to be on, and we do the route change start. What do we want to do? Well, I want to run a function that will handle all of this. So I'm going to first create the function right here, and I'm going to call it handle route, something like that, route, and then start, something like that, very simple. And of course, we're going to be passing, we're going to get the URL, and then of course, we're going to run some code. We're going to, write it in a couple minutes. So this one, we will trigger the this dot and then handle route start. Right. So then we have another event. I'm going to add it right now. I'm just going to copy all of this so I don't have to type it all over again. And I'm going to do the route change complete. So with just by reading the names, you can assume that this one is going to do, right? So I'm going to do the other one. I'm going to do handle, and I'm going to call it route, then change, and then complete. Right. So of course we are still going to get the URL, and then we're going to run a function, do something. Okay. So I need to pass the name to this one. Okay, so on this one, what's going to happen is that when the application, maybe we go to a different route and it starts changing, this one is going to get fired. And after, it's going to get triggered. And after the route changes completely, the other one is going to get triggered. Of course, we're going to do a console log so we can see it on the screen. So I'm going to say app is changing to, and I don't know, whatever. And I'm going to be passing the URL. And on the other one, it's just going to do the same thing. Console log, and for this one, it's changing. It's going to be changed. This one, the application already changed the route. So, okay, I'm going to save it, and let's give it a try. I'm going to reload the application. I'm going to go to About Us, and as you can see, I double-clicked on this one. Let me just reload it again. Nothing happens, and if I go to Contact, we get the callback. App is changing to Contact, and then after it changed, we get the app change to contact. Pretty cool. So then you get the other ones, which is going to be before history change and route change and error. So the before history change is going to do pretty much the same thing than this one's, but it's going to be listening for the change on the history of the browser, the browser history. So if we do it, we're going to pretty much see the same example. So I'm going to do handle route. Maybe let me just call it something else, like maybe before and then history and then change. And again, we're going to do pretty much the same. So I'm just going to copy paste and app change, and I'm going to say history, something like that. Something simple, history. All right. So then, of course, we just follow the same procedure. We just need to let the application know that we want to listen for the history change. So before the history of the browser changes, this one is going to fired. So I'm going to go here, going to go to About Us, reload the application. And if I go to a different spot, notice that it says app is changing to, and notice that this one, it's running before everything gets changed. Then, of course, the browser history is going to get changed. So then you're going to get that one fired. And then after, and only after everything changed, you get the contact. So you get different, stages of the same action. And the other one that it's useful is the route change error. I'm not going to give you this one because it's pretty much self-explanatory. What you're going to do whenever you set this listener is that if the user is trying to go to a different location, and that location, that redirection or whatever the user wants to do fails, you're going to get this one trigger. It's going to say error and fires. There's an error when changing routes. Pretty simple. And on this one, will fire if there is a change on the hash of the URL. Like I told before, I couldn't find any useful example with this ones, and they're kind of not working. Maybe you're going to watch this in the future and you try this ones and these ones are working, but as for now, these ones are a little bit buggy. All right, pretty cool. Just one more tool we get in the we can use to make our application better. Okay, so we are done with the routes. We know what we need to know to keep moving forward. At this stage, if you want to create an application, no database, no pretty simple application, well, you can totally do it. You can use the includes, you can use the pages, you can do styles, you can create a server to manage custom URLs, and you can do a lot of stuff right now. But of course, we need to learn a little bit more. Now, on the next section, before we go to the authentication part of the course, we're going to talk about something very, very important. We're going to talk about the app application, the app file. And again, don't miss it. The next one, it's a little bit complicated. I wouldn't say complicated, it's a little bit weird because it's new, but it's really important for us. So let's go to the next one and start with the app.